So let it be written, so let it be done. This is Tabletop Terrors. Are you seeing our stream? Please let us know. I believe we're good. We should be good. We definitely are ready to talk about Ironsworn, and we're ready to talk about Dragongrin. And first, though, as some of the people in the chat have mentioned, Kiel, it is 6 a.m. your time. It is 6 p.m. my time. How are you doing so far? How's your morning going?
Yeah, great so far. Thank you. I got my coffee. I got some fantasy tunes in my ears. I got some good company, and I've been brushing up on my homework, ready for this stream. Looking through my Dragongrin tome. Oh, it's so good. So I'm doing great, man. How about you? How's your day been?
Awesome, man. It's been a very productive day.
Oh yeah.
As you may have heard, I am now a full-time freelance writer.
Yeah, buddy.
And, so, that comes with deadlines. And so nailed several things I needed to finish today. And then we were actually just in kind of a super secret Absolute Tabletop playtest. Because I can do that now in the middle of the day. I can schedule a playtest for 2 hours because I am freelance, which is fantastic. So rolling right into this, I just grabbed a quick snack to tide me over for some delicious homemade pizza that my wife made, and then I'm great, and then I'm gonna relax for the evening. So
hell yeah,
yeah,
that's awesome, man. Setting your own schedule, damn right.
It's been a dream for the years escaped me.
Yeah.
On and off. I've always wanted to be able to do that. Definitely some challenges that come with it, but I'm loving it. So I just wanted to thank you for coming on and talking to me about Ironsworn and Dragongrin. You were instrumental in Dragongrin, and you are someone who I know over on Run Right Play is playing in a solo campaign of Ironsworn. So I felt like you were the perfect guy to bring on here and start talking about this stuff.
Oh yeah, thank you. I'm so stoked to be here. Thanks for inviting me on, or letting me invite myself along.
No, I'm happy to do it. Speaking of inviting yourself, I wanted to check. I saw a notification while I was doing the playtest from Lloyd, and if the notification was, where was my invite?
Yeah,
Lloyd,
basically.
If you're watching this, I will send you the stream link. I don't use overlays. I'm a savage, and so I will add you directly in there.
Ultimate versatility. There you go.
Right? So while I give a bit of setup, I'm going to check to see if that is what, in fact, Lloyd messaged me about. But
he did, yeah.
What I did want to start... Oh, okay, he did.
Yeah, he was like, so I'll expect a Zoom link, or...
Yeah. Do you want to send it to him?
Yeah, man, I'll send it to him.
Yeah, if he's really around. I mean, Lloyd, if you're not really around, if you're not onto it, I'm understanding of that, but you are more than invited. So, the thing I wanted to mention was that I have some experience with this. So I'm running 2 very infrequent home games in which I'm running Ironsworn in Dragongrin. And the reason why I'm asking this question isn't just because it's a what if to me. I'm asking this question because we're playing, and it's this sort of gray area where it doesn't quite feel like they're Ironsworn characters, but it also doesn't quite feel like they're Dragongrin characters. Mm. And so I'm not looking to overdevelop it.
Yeah, for sure.
I'm even if that's just one little piece that slots in nicely, beautiful. But I as a game master didn't feel Dragongrin coming to life as much as I wanted it to so far in these games, if that makes sense.
Gotcha. Yeah, for sure. Yeah. So is the approach then, as much as possible, just reskinning and tweaking the existing stuff, like the assets, the Ironsworn assets and the rules and that, rather than, like you say, rather than overhauling everything?
I'd be okay with that because the Ironsworn community is phenomenal. They play the game a lot, and Sean is a very thoughtful designer. So I know he's put a lot of thought behind the choices, and so I wouldn't want to change anything willy-nilly. If so, and then to kind of give a point B of that, I did actually let them choose assets and sort of reskin them.
Yeah, nice.
And any time we would come across something that didn't quite work, I would always let them invoke their culture. So I would sort of use it as a floating asset that I would just let them have a plus to the roll. Or, yeah, you're a Silverwise, you would be able to do this. Even though you didn't choose, Commune with Dead or whatever it is. I was like, I feel like just at a core, you'd be able to do this. Go ahead, +1, and just call it Silverwise.
Yeah, awesome.
So that was my little hack. And I feel like there might be something in between that. So in between just pure reskinning and then something so general as just saying, yeah, +1. It worked.
Yeah.
It worked. By all means, it worked. But full disclosure, if I could find something that's a bit of a sweet spot, I would absolutely eventually, put out some sort of Dragongrin Ironsworn. You know what I mean? Like some sort of thing with assets and fun stuff. So, yeah.
Yeah, awesome. Well, and that's one of the many awesome things about Ironsworn is that Sean released it with the Creative Commons license, right? So
exactly.
Stuff like this can very much be done. So, the first step there, like in terms of like degrees of approaching it, I don't think there's a problem with just sort of formalizing the way you've already done that for cultures, in terms of, I know you spoke before about for the Dragongrin Ironsworn. Okay, so in the standard Ironsworn, characters have a bunch of assets. So that is like the things, for those that don't know, those are the things that make up basically what your character can do, but they also make up who your character is and what they're about, right? So it can be things like a companion, it can be like a path that your character's on, it can be combat talents and things like that. So
sure.
I know that you mentioned that having, instead of picking just any 3 of those that you like you do in normal, in standard Ironsworn, you're talking about you always pick one culture, one background and things like that, perhaps. And I think, yeah, doing that with culture is maybe the way to go, where the culture assets, everyone has one, and they're, the way that their bonuses are, because usually, as you know, there's like usually 3, and you pick one when you first take the asset, and then as you get more experience and upgrade the asset, you can unlock extra ones. So maybe it's just that the culture ones aren't so much about unlocking more, it's just that they have a set of 3 things that you can just always do. They're not necessarily super potent ones, but they're always flavorful. And because if that's what you've found anyway, like, yeah, Speak with the Dead for Silverwise, then that's just one that's in there,
Yeah, I like it. And so how do you feel? Because I don't want it to get too hinky. One of the things with Ironsworn is that I'm saying like Sean and the community, they've tuned it into this machine that is, at least for Tim, just narrative enough and just mechanical enough to have this crazy dopamine cycle of wanting to keep playing.
Yeah.
And so I think that part of that is definitely the simplicity. But I think if you add on a measure of complexity to some parts of it that wouldn't happen often, it could feel cool. And that whole lead up was this. I love the idea of the cultures having, as you say, those sort of soft things that they can do because they are that culture. I also think it could be cool, but you tell me if this is too like, that certain things are only unlockable by a culture.
Yeah.
If it's their thing. But I also don't want to be exclusionary. But as an example, like if you are a Grimdal, there are things that your culture is innately very good at. So I don't know if that is a way to, because the other option would be the Grimdal get it cheaper. So anyone can take it, but the Grimdal get it at this tier versus this many. what about something like that? Like if you're a Grimdal, you get that asset for less than it would cost for a full upgrade or something.
Yeah. I had a similar thought process putting my notes together for this, because the homework that Tim set us both for everyone watching was sort of pick a heritage, culture, class, and background that we can talk about. And I picked Silverwise for the culture, so we've already touched on that. And
beautiful. Just
making some notes here, like Silverwise Hound. That to me would be a perfect companion asset, but it's like, is that exclusive for Silverwise, or is it just that they can get more out of it, or they get it cheaper or something? I think as that example, that one might be exclusive, right? I don't think there's a problem with, I don't think it's adding too much complexity, because it's so modular, it's asset by asset. If a particular asset says, has some prerequisites, then that's fine, I think. And some of them can be hard, like only Silverwise can take this one, and some can be sort of softer, where if you're Silverwise, anyone can take it, but Silverwise get it cheaper or get an extra bonus or something like that.
Yeah, I like that a lot. And because I think it could, I had the exact same constraints in my brain as someone who works so hard on Dragongrin. Meaning, for Tim, I have some mental blocks about what goes where, because we worked hard thematically to stack that up perfectly. Ironsworn as a game is designed to sort of not do that on purpose for the flexibility. So I think the middle ground could be the cheapness with some really specific ones that seem extra there would be exclusive. Because for the example of Silverwise Hound, I'm just thinking of my Ironsworn games, and I'm thinking how in an Ironsworn game, I could see a non-Silverwise having the Hound and there being some wicked vow behind it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
it could be.
So maybe
anything.
That's the answer.
Could be that you're trying to return it to its rightful owner, or exactly. Could be it saved your life when it was a pup or something.
All of the things. So I don't know all of the in the heritages. There have the. Well, actually, let me put a pin in heritages. In the cultures, when you choose it, as you know, there's a handful of things that you can sort of spec out in. I don't know them by heart, but I'd have to reread them all, not just the one that I did my homework on, to see if there were any that were extra juicy. That would be like, no, you kind of have to be a Zarfin to do this. And set those apart. And then the rest, I think, as a starting point for a playtest, I would say the culture gets it for the price of a normal... Because, correct me if I'm wrong, a new asset card costs X of dollars or money of experience, but filling in a bubble on an asset card is cheaper.
Upgrading an existing one, yeah, that's right.
So I would probably play it as, put a pin in if any were exclusive. The heritage, nope, I keep saying that. The culture gets to grab a new one as though it was an upgrade.
That's cool. Yep. Yes, I like that. I like that a lot.
So it does sort of lean like, well, hey, culturally, you can do things differently, but it's easier to follow the way of your cultures. You would have access to those things, but it's the Jarl.
Right. I just saw he replied earlier 5 minutes ago saying he was running a game, and then he popped in here. So I checked the chat again, and he said his game was cancelled. So there we go. Yeah. Welcome.
That's fantastic. Well, welcome.
It's a surprise.
No, you're good. As I said to Kiel, I said I'm a savage and I don't use overlays, so there's no qualm here. I was like, jump in.
Okay.
So what we're talking about, and I'm going to jump into chat for a little bit too, but we're basically talking about the way that Ironsworn is built and the way that Dragongrin is built. I'm running 2 home games, and if I just reskin Ironsworn, it doesn't quite feel Dragongrin enough. It's like there's 0.5 that still needs to gap, and so I've hacked it a little, but I was looking for ways to sort of make it a little more formal, and I think we might have just come up on something. So I'm going to hit the chat, and then I'm going to run this by you. I just want to say hello to everyone who's watching. Cole, thanks for being here. Micah, I appreciate the comments about freelance. I've definitely been looking forward to it for a long time. And Jeremy, please feel free to weigh in on any of this. You are an amazing GM. Jeremy also has a question. And did I miss anybody? Blake and Josh as well. If I missed anybody, just, what you looking at? Just do some sort of a third grade potty mouth swear in the Hangout or in the chat, and I'll reply. So Kiel, do you want to tell Lloyd what we've come up with and see if...
Yeah. So...
Well, Lloyd, let me ask you first. Have you ever played Ironsworn?
Yeah, a little bit. A very little bit. I played a session with Kiel, and we started a Starforged game. Haven't actually played it yet, but we did the work.
The setup.
We did the setup, yeah.
That's perfect. That's perfect. So yeah. I think you'll have enough mustard then to kind of know what we're talking about. Great.
So what we're talking about, obviously, is so Tim's already been playing or running an Ironsworn campaign at home, set in Dragongrin, and yeah, like he said, that was mostly sort of allowing his players to reskin the existing Ironsworn assets. Which you'll remember are things like companions, paths, combat talents, things like that. The stuff that makes up what your character can do and kind of who they are. And so what we're talking about is some of the juicy stuff that makes Dragongrin what it is the cultures, the heritages, the backgrounds, which are like professions, which I love as well, and the classes. It's all just... awesome and sort of set apart from standard D&D. So trying to capture, and obviously in the Dragongrin book, that's like integrated with the D&D 5e mechanics, but it's also such rich lore and setting, and character options. And so it's sort of like taking the essence of that and getting the best of both worlds and having it sort of doing that marriage so that it works well in Ironsworn. And so what we're talking about first was cultures, and we're talking about Silverwires as an example, and talking about how something that doesn't happen in standard Ironsworn, but we think would probably be great approach for this is like having certain assets which are maybe sometimes exclusive to certain cultures. So I guess there'd be culture assets, right? So you pick one of them first, and that culture asset itself will probably give you certain like passive soft bonuses. Like if you're Silverwise, then you can always get +1 to communing with the dead or something like that.
It's tricky in that D&D is so specific and Ironsworn is so not. Right, so D&D is like you have a culture and a background and a class, and you have this thing and you have this, and all of those have 30 features, and all of those features have like 3 subheadings. So like it's difficult to like condense those down into a little card, And the other like my immediate thought was like, okay, we make cultures assets and we make classes assets and we make whatever, all of these things assets, but then you've got level 1 where your first guy has 12 assets when you're kicking off the game, and that's not really ideal either, right? You've still got too much stuff then.
Exactly. Right.
And that's sort of true of D&D. You do have too much stuff when you start, right? You've got a million things already to keep track of and whatever, but like I guess the thing for me would be like if you're making lots of assets for a character in Ironsworn or Starforged or something, I guess you make a lot of those assets like your background or whatever else like that just narrative and not mechanical, or barely mechanical, or hyper specifically mechanical, to avoid just getting like flat bonuses to things all over because you're XYZ,
Can I throw something out there real quick, and then I'll throw it back to you, Kiel? So when I first started, because I've started this journey, it's been a couple months, but I was I admitted this to Kiel, I was like, I wanted all the Dragongrin because I helped to stack it so neatly, and where I'm at today is, and again, this is in this moment, heritages would be almost fully narrative, as you say. Backgrounds would almost be fully narrative. Classes, even, I think, might be fully narrative, except for maybe some select very specific things like the Time Thief and things like that.
Mm.
And then the cultures is where the sauce is. And what Kiel and I had kind of discussed was, in Ironsworn, you can either spend less experience to fill in a bubble and gain more of what you've already got, or you can spend more and get a new one. To kind of lean into the cultures, if you're not a Zarfin, you have to buy every one of them because you're working for it. But if you are a Zarfin, you can maybe get some of those as upgrades. So a full new asset as an upgrade, because you're available to the culture, you have access to their, all of the things. So that's kind of where I was at right now. So how does that hit you, Kiel, and you, Lloyd, if we abstracted, and Lloyd, I like your addendum, hyper mechanical benefits, where if you happen to be a dwarf, you might get +1 momentum on a very specific move if you succeed.
Yeah.
Like something really like
gotta be specific,
rare.
Because if already, even with this, you're going to have so much stuff that you have to make, right? So if you want to include all these amazing features that exist in Dragongrin, like you got to make 100 assets, right? You got to make so much stuff. And like, that's tricky, I think, because yeah,
that sounds super fun to me. But also
it does sound fun, but it's also it also leads to it leads to like analysis paralysis, where you've got 100 options, when you're making your guy.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, that'd be part of the fun of the design challenge for that. For me, I think, and this is one of the things I'm excited about talking about this, is like finding which way to slice it, right? And because in the Dragongrin book for 5e, it's all very, like, shall we say, siloed or vertically sliced in terms of like Silverwise gives you these mechanical things. Yes, it means it has these narrative implications, but being Silverwise culture gives you that. Being a Missive Crow background gives you that. But I think it's like having a look at laterally which things go across, right? Like, so for example here, like one of the Silverwise cultural focuses is Sixth Sense. And so it's actually narratively, it's the whispers of the dead that alert you to danger. You have advantage on initiative checks. So the narrative bit is the whispers of the dead alert you to danger. The mechanical bit is advantage on initiative checks. So what that could be instead is, if there's a Sixth Sense asset, that could be one where it's like a cultural affinity thing. So Silverwise, could have that discount. If they're buying it, they only have to pay as much as if they would be upgrading a card rather than the full price. Mm-hmm. And there could be, I don't know if there'd be different benefits, but I think mechanically I just jotted down like, because there's no initiative works differently in Ironsworn. So instead of advantage on initiative checks, maybe it translates to something like, when you enter the fray, treat a miss as a weak hit. Right. So that is kind of how I think I would like to do it. Like Sixth Sense is in the Dragongrin, the Dead Man's Guide to Dragongrin. It's a specific ability that you can take as when your character is of the Silverwise culture. But if we sort of split that out, and it's just an asset that anyone can take, but Silverwise can get it cheaper. And as well, paired with that, I think having like suggested sets of assets for certain archetypes. So that's maybe the way to go. Sure. Like Silverwise suggestions, assets to pick is like Sixth Sense, Silverwise Hound. Maybe anyone can get them, but it's like these groupings of, if you're a Silverwise, here's some suggestions. If you're a Missive Crow, here's some suggestions. Mm-hmm. Maybe for the backgrounds, those, because they're professions, those would be, you'd actually have like a Missive Crow asset and Granic Thane. Sorry, that's a culture.
There are a couple, though, that are like both. So I could see where you could do that.
Yeah.
Like Red Sail Market. And,
I would say that games like that don't have very complicated mechanics, complicated is not the right word, but don't have very granular mechanics. I think the way that they often work is they let you, when you pick a character, break a rule in a specific way, right? So I'm thinking of Black Hack, where that happens a lot, where like you can do this thing that nobody else can do. And I think that's a good way to look at assets for this in terms of a class, you pick a class, or like, well, you would pick, I think, a subclass, right? You wouldn't actually say I'm a fighter. You would say I'm a whatever, a Granic Thane mercenary, or
right, yeah.
And you would pick that, and that would give you a choice between two things, maybe, or just one thing.
Yep.
This is a thing you do when you do this move. You can do this extra thing that nobody else gets to do, and that's your class, right? It doesn't need to be more complicated than that. That's like the way that you cheat and break the rules of the game to do a cool thing because you're this specific thing. And I think then with background, you would get a broad narrative thing. So you're you were in the Legion. And that means when you interact with legionaries, you get a +1 and you know things about the Legion whenever, and one very, very small mechanical thing, very specific mechanical thing. And I would say the same thing for Heritage, where you have a broad narrative bonus, like when you're interacting with people from your heritage, great, you have bonuses there. And one specific, like you were saying, one specific thing, like you pick one of the features, you don't get all of it, right? Because you couldn't in Ironsworn get like, you got dark vision and you got this thing and you got like, it's too much, right? So you got to, I think there's a lot of boiling down that has to happen, like distilling the feeling of a whole class into one ability, or one heritage into one ability.
And Ironsworn does that so well, and that's what I think I've seen through play, because they take the thing that makes the thing unique. They take the idea behind the idea, and then they're like, hey, you just skin this however you want. You're a sword person, So the way that I would, if you were like, all right, cool, Tim, I need a mock-up by, this weekend, what I would do is I would go in and grab all the Silverwise stuff, and I would paste it into a doc, and then I would limit myself to start with 2 assets, because I can distill down, because it was 5e, so we needed to have like 5 or 6 for each one, and we wanted to. I could take those narratively and put them as 3 bubbles under one asset, and you choose which one you start with, but they're samey enough that as you fill out the bubbles, that would work. So I would probably do 2 to 3 culture assets to start with, and then, Lloyd, as you say, like a background asset and a heritage asset that are very narrative, and then I think that would be fine, because you'd still only start with 3. And for the classes, I would do exactly as you say. Distill the Path of the Mauler, or the Time Thief, the fact that they can mess with time. That's the one cool thing, and everything else was like, what are 5e abilities that we can use? So I think that if people don't want to be a time thief, they never have to be. And they can still be great in combat, and they can still do all the other things. So I think that works really well. And it's the reverse process of making a class in 5e, where you think, I have a cool idea, now I have to expand it into 10 things. It's like, now it's like I have 10 things and I have to crush them down to one thing, which is actually very easy.
Yep. I think it's easier
because you can distill it. Yep. Yeah. So,
and also the other thing is that,
go ahead.
The balance of a game is like not so important, because it's solo or a group, but like I don't think like balance, people are very concerned about balance in 5e, that like one class is better than the other. It doesn't really matter so much in a more narrative game, so you can worry less about that too. Everyone just like does a cool thing. Awesome.
Yeah. And so I'm going to tie that into Jeremy's question, because Jeremy did have a question. He said, what would a major difference be between running a Dragongrin story in Ironsworn versus in D&D? My experience is, because of the way the fiction works with the mechanics, things can escalate very quickly, and the passage of time is not the same as a D&D session. That's the biggest thing that kind of really rocked my world, is that when you roll in Ironsworn, it's not for one action. It's for like a big move, which can encompass days worth of things happening if you do poorly. So I find that someone messing up can put a hard fast forward button on everything, and it can get very epic very fast. That's the main difference. And so I was like, okay, the reason why I chose to do Ironsworn after we spent so much time on that book is these were every single person in both home groups, first 0 experience with RPGs. And I was going to have to make all those 5e characters and then play. And I thought there would be no anchor who could kind of help people out and all that. I would be basically playing D&D with 5 character sheets
You're
myself.
playing yourself, yeah.
Yeah.
I run a home game at the moment. It's Harbinger, and like we've done like 6 or 7 sessions, and still people are like, "And how do I make an attack?" And I'm like, "Guys, you know, like, you know." And so you are both running the game and doing the mechanics for all the people who are playing the game, and it's just not good, right? Like, it's just no good.
Rouse not the wrath of the Jarl, guys.
Yeah, but I mean, I think that works really well. So, do you want to try and experiment with whatever you prepared? Kiel and I both had homework where we sort of took a character build, and then we were going to try to make it with assets. Do you want to kind of give that a shot, even if they're samey?
My dog.
Yeah, for sure.
My dog. So, let's start, I guess, with heritage. What heritage did you go with?
So I thought Festir was like a perfect one because it's already such, in the Dead Man's Guide, it's such a modular like thing. Like it's the all-encompassing create your own tiefling or dragonborn or whatever, right? Or monstrous kind of race. So I thought that was a fun one to go with, right?
That's fantastic. That's a trickier one because there's so many of the things.
Yes, that's the other side of it.
So, do you have any ideas of how you would asset that out with, say, 2 or 3 bubbles?
So that's the thing. I guess it's distilling this one down to 2 or 3 in particular. Yeah. Let me get back to the festive page here. Because the reason I picked that one is because it is already literally like a pick and mix, right? It's like, do you have wings? Do you, if so, then you get this bonus. So basically that's kind of what I think it would be. But if we're not going for like a larger card with a bunch of like, here's 8 options, pick 3, and we're distilling it down to 3 options, then of which you only pick 1, then maybe they're like groupings, right? It's like...
same thought.
Yeah.
Same exact thought. Yeah.
So it's like wings and whatever, they're kind of, I guess probably what we would basically do is like the Dragonborn collection, the Tiefling collection, horns and a tail, and the whatever else, like the bugbear, furry, toothy dude.
and that's the thing too, though, is that I might even say, because we're helping with Starforged, and one of the things that I've noticed is that Sean does a concentrated amount of information, and I don't have the self-control. Like, I know, I get it. I understand that I want to tell you what I think it is. He's like, no, just figure it out. So I would almost say choose 3, up to 3 strange features about yourself. Things like horns, a tail, claws, or even wings.
Oh, yeah.
You could go a step further and just say choose some. Don't specify, right?
Right.
How many?
There you go.
That's a great, that's a lot of Powered by the Apocalypse games, like Dungeon World does a similar thing where you just have a look, which is literally just a narrative thing, but then you separately have like the mechanical bits, and then you as the player sort of marry the two, right? Like, I love that, yeah.
And the reason why I think that works is because in 5e, the mechanics work within this game engine. So you have all of these things that you need to interact with the game engine. And the game engine is mostly combat. Ironsworn, the way I also would like keep an eye out on this, is it's mostly a handful of moves. Handful loosely. What is it, like a dozen?
Oh,
so everything you're doing should probably have something to do with the move.
Yeah.
And so it's real easy to distill that down because then you just say, hey.
Yeah, exactly. Sorry, this is what my brain does. I'm like, I had a thought and I already forgot it from earlier. So while I remember it now, when we're talking before, so a lot of the assets in standard Ironsworn, I'm looking through them now, like by design, the bonuses that they give are generally like the rubber meets the road with a move, right? It's like when you face danger. So if you have a hawk, that's got the vigilant bonus. When you face danger, which is a move, plus wits to detect an approaching threat. So that's a very specific trigger. or when you enter the fray plus wits against an ambush. So 2 very specific things, but you get to add +2 because your hawk is vigilant. It's up there helping you watch or whatever. Those are bonuses when you do a particular move with some extra conditionals. I think just going back to the culture and heritage, the background and heritage stuff, where those probably wouldn't, the bonuses you get from those wouldn't be 2 particular moves. They'd just be situational things. They'd be like any move, anything you're doing to do with the undead or whatever, you get a +1, you know?
Yeah,
so that's where
where
that comes from. And then the classes, and what is it? Classes and backgrounds, cultures. Yeah, I wrote the wrong ones here. But the classes in particular, like I love the fighter class again because it was 5e. But the fighter class, those are marauders, right? Druids are veil walkers, so those already are 1-for-1 like paths. In my mind, one of the asset types.
I hadn't even
paths.
considered that. I haven't even considered that. That is such a clear-cut way to make it unique.
Yeah,
that we did because I wanted to have names for things in the world, but now it helps with Ironsworn.
Yeah, exactly.
Flipping brilliant.
So that was an exciting thought.
I would say that's kind of what I was talking about earlier with the way that like your special abilities let you sort of bend or break some of the existing rules. Like we do with Blood and Ink, where, everyone has the same set of moves, but because you're this thing, you do it slightly differently. You get a slight bonus in these specific situations or whatever, right? So like that could look like you said there, in specific situations, you're getting bonuses. It could look like additional options if there's a drop down, when you do a big hit or whatever, like you have this option on top of the other ones because you're whatever, you're a mauler or whatever, so you can do this extra thing. But it shouldn't be much more complicated than that, right? Like you're taking existing moves and you're letting classes and things like that adjust the moves in a way that feels like sick, only I can do that. Like that's the cool feeling, I think, and that's also means that when you have learned the moves, you know how to play the game. Your stuff, your personal stuff doesn't give you new moves and things like that. It just lets you adjust them for a way that's beneficial and fun for you,
Exactly, yeah. That's a great distinction, actually, yeah, between the way that Ironsworn works and is designed, like it's modular by design, versus 5e, where, like some of the cultural or heritage traits that you get and classes, like their extra abilities, they're extra moves, effectively, and you've got potentially dozens to pick from, so. That's a great point. None of them add different moves. None of them can change the core thing of what you do, which is a great part of the design of Ironsworn.
Totally.
The engine covers everything. It's just you're flavoring or breaking things slightly differently. Yeah.
And that's why I wanted to be so careful, because I don't want to insert something that Sean purposefully left out for the elegance of that engine. So I think that this is a really good middle point. And I think to what you said, I got another idea. Well, like Lloyd, you said the classes are paths. This is such a cool way to have, did I say Lloyd?
That was my idea. I don't know.
No. Yet another example of Lloyd stealing.
No. I absolutely was thinking Kiel. I was even looking at you on my other screen in the Zoom. But so as an example, the classes are paths. So in Dragongrin, a bard is known as an eloquent. What I think could be cool, if you could find the narrative sweet spot, is that when you choose eloquent, once you level up, you can either choose one. Basically, you can choose a subclass is distilled into a single bubble.
Yeah.
Right.
So the eloquent does the things already. You're a bard. You're great. If you want to become a blood page, which is basically like a heavy metal songwriter, that your song gets so recognizable that people are like, oh my God, exactly. You could take that, but it's just a bubble.
Yeah.
So now you're a bard that can do that, and the other cool thing we had bards do.
Yeah. So there'd be like, would that be 4 bubbles? Like one of them is pre-filled in, like that's just for taking the class, you get that. And then there's 3, subclass options, 3 upgrade options. which are mutually exclusive.
Something like that.
Exclusive for sure, exclusive. I would say you choose to be an eloquent, and then from there you can upgrade into one of the subclasses.
Absolutely agree. Absolutely.
And
agreed.
either that subclass either improves the thing you do as an eloquent, which I think is probably the best way, changes the thing you do already and improves upon it in some way, or it adds another ability. I would steer away from having another and try and keep it as concise as possible. So as an eloquent, you can sing a song, and that will embolden you when you enter the fray or whatever, for example. And then when you're a blood page, you also freak out enemies. And when you're the other thing, you do, so it's like still the same move. You're not getting more stuff. I think that's my biggest concern, is that you'll have too much stuff, and you don't need to have too much stuff. You can just have a small amount of awesome stuff,
That's it. Yeah. And importantly, none of it is new moves. All of it is tweaks and bonuses to existing to the core engine. Exactly. So I mean, there's in standard Ironsworn, there's a path called Dancer. So that might be a good starting point to look at for the for reskinning for the bard, right? So the bubble that's pre-filled in is when you secure an advantage plus edge by dancing for an audience. So I guess it would just be by performing for an audience. Add +1 and take 2 momentum on a hit. And then if you get a strong hit, then you get an extra bonus as well. So, yeah.
Cool. And I think I might, and I know that this is less minimalist. I would still keep it more minimalist than Dragongrin. I might use slightly bigger cards. I still wouldn't bog them down, but I would want to make sure that everything was on the card. That makes sense?
Yeah.
And so, and not like more than maybe just slightly big. And maybe not. Maybe I could fit it all. But I think there's a little more flavor, whereas Ironsworn is on purpose. It's a little more general, so that you can kind of use it everywhere, whereas in Dragongrin, there's a little more mustard on top on purpose.
Yeah, that's it. I mean, and I think a big relevant point to that is Ironsworn is that way because, yes, there's like a default setting of the Ironlands, but it's also designed so that the setting itself can be open to interpretation.
Yeah,
but
exactly.
But this is a specific setting, so wanting to inject setting specifics into the things. So yeah. I mean, I think there's 9 cards on an A4 sheet, so they're like relatively playing card size. So you could go like tarot card size. That's a nice, satisfying size.
Yeah, something like that. And I wouldn't say like I'm just going to do that if I had to, and if I was like, because I might need to add that extra line of just a sentence of flavor.
Yeah.
Talking about the bleak, whereas in Ironsworn they don't talk about that kind of stuff.
The other thing is that cards have 2 sides, right? So you could have mechanics one side, flavor on the other side. Since you don't need,
that's a
they
really
don't need
good
to
call.
be face down or shuffled, right? So
it's just that on the back it says whether they're a path, a companion, or whatever. So you could still have that, but then also,
that actually could be cool, because then you could use same thing. It's a path. There's also a lot to do with like color coding and symbols for at a glance work, and then it's more of a header that says path, and then there's some narrative stuff, and like you say, all the mechanics are on the back.
Yeah.
So that you do your fluff on the front. I really like that a lot.
So using an example then for paths, because what we sort of realize is that the classes in a Dead Man's Guide can be used one for one as paths, right? So the Paladin, which is the Oath Scarred, that's the one that I put down for my little homework thing.
Oh, perfect, yeah.
Is like, shall we speculate about what that might look like? The Oath Scarred path, right? Because
let's do it.
Dead Man's Guide, that is mechanically a class, but we can try and separate ourselves from that thinking now, and it's more like even like imagining, all right, what is an Oath Scarred in Dragongrin, in not even a role-playing game, just in like a work of fiction, like a novel about where the main protagonist is an Oath Scarred, right? Like,
sure.
I think going, shooting for the moon that way, and then we'll fall somewhere among the stars, like as to what we include or what it might look like. So,
well, if I might draw upon the works of the Jarl himself.
Hey.
I think so.
Blessed be his name.
One of the things is it's kind of my favorite version of a monster hunter, and I'm not just saying that because it's in the book that I was a project manager of. But there's this Oath of the Cleansing, and it's a Monster Hunter Paladin, but it's not rooted in any sort of morality. And there's this oath that's the tenets of the cleansing that's basically like, it calls that a monster is blameless, a monster is relative, and the monster is you. And so, to me, the Oath of the Cleansing would be the subclass, but to answer you, in Dragongrin, the way that we positioned it was, they pick up causes. So it's people who swear oaths to causes. So it's, in the book, we have totally decoupled religion from any of the classes. You absolutely can, but it's not necessary. You know, so like you could be a cleric of, some sort of force that has nothing to do with religion, or you could just be someone who wields magic that you claim is from your beliefs. So it would be someone with a cause that swears an oath to fulfill that cause.
And actually,
so that would be what a Oathscar would be.
Yeah, perfect. And I like as well. This brings to the fore, I guess, an elephant in the room, which is Ironsworn as a game and as an engine. Like you said before, it's like this dopamine cycle of swear a vow, progress the vow, complete the vow, get XP, upgrade your shit, and swear another vow. So in the sort of default setting of Ironsworn, that's like you play as an Ironsworn, your character is badass, like, and swearing vows upon iron, like, is binding. So it's very easy to just reskin that as a quest system, right?
Can I give you my take on what I was thinking? So I think it goes along with the tone of Dragongrin, that you're supposed to not feel as in control. That's something else I came up against, but I didn't want to. I have new players, and so I'm not trying to impose deeper themes while they're still learning rules. And like, what do I do? And I'm like, you have to answer a morally great question. That's what you do.
That's what you gotta do, son.
So what I've done is, in my head, part of my homework is it's not up to the player. It's that basically you're in a crux.
Oh.
So your timeline is going a certain way, and you have to get out of it, or else the crux is going to say, hey, yeah, sorry, you need bad things. So as a result of the timeline, and you don't in Bleak Iron or Irondragon or Dragonsworn, you don't Irongrin. You don't consult the Oracle, you consult the Crucible.
Yes. Ah, nice. Hell yeah.
So
Chef
that was how I was going
around.
to hand wave that. Perfect. Yeah, it's like, so it's kind of out of your control. Now you can also, it's not totally like, but you can decide that you want to try to do something and swear it, but you're rippling in the timeline. So things can happen to you, or you can make them happen. It can be both ways.
I love the implications of that as well. Like, you can't, so Ironsworn, standard game of Ironsworn is designed as like an open-ended engine that you can, play solo, play co-op without a GM if you like. And swearing vows and going on these quests is the sort of engine that propels that. But I love the implications of what you're saying there, where the nature of that play experience changes, because like you say, when you step into Dragongrin, like, it's a world where evil is won. You don't really have that much control over your destiny. Even when you think you do, even when you're a Lord of Ash, no, not really. The dismembered Lord.
Exactly.
Yeah. So I'll actually love the idea of leaning into the play experience for Irongrin or whatever it is, right? Is not an open-ended engine where you can, just start on an adventure and go off. Like, obviously you'd need some element of that. This is just thinking out loud. My pitch is like, is that, I don't know, what am I trying to say? It's like, yeah, there's like, in Ironsworn, you tell your own story, you generate your own quests and set the direction yourself. So what would that look like if you don't get to do that, or you only have, the illusion of being able to do that. Would there be certain, and I mean, this is what's in Dead Man's Guide to Dragongrin, there's cruxes, right? So maybe that is the game. It's not an open-ended come in and generate whatever you want. It's like when you play Irongrin, you are playing one of the cruxes. Yeah, you can come up with your characters, and it's going to be a unique experience every time, but it is a point in time in the timeline. Like, it's like Umbrella Academy. If you're seeing that, it's like playing Irongrin or playing a D&D game in using a Dead Man's Guide to Dragongrin. You can do whatever you want, but playing Irongrin maybe is a specific play experience. It's somewhere between a one-page RPG where it's a very specific thing, but it's like playing through a particular like turning point in the timeline in history, right?
Yeah. Yeah, and I think there is an element of, and this is how we've painted Dragongrin. If the Marrow and an Arcseer show up at your door, there's a chance they're going to help you with your crops. They need what's best for the timeline. They don't need what's best for you. So you can be in a field and there's a huge war maker that's plowing the fields for you and planting seed, while across the street your neighbor's being black bagged and taken away.
Yeah.
Because that's what's best for the timeline. It doesn't matter. It's not about we're evil and we want to do evil things. We have a job to do, and it's to keep this machine running. And so I think I would play both sides of that fence, and what you're saying exactly right. You never know if you're going on a quest because it's in your heart and it's supposed to happen, or if it's because someone behind the scenes is pulling the strings and pushing you in a direction. That's kind of an unanswered question. So it's a matter of player belief.
Yeah.
Like, do you believe you're on a quest because you're fulfilling an oath? Maybe you are, but maybe that's just the monster they need killed, and you need to be the one to do it because that's the best outcome.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that.
I mean, does that kind of hit with what you're saying?
Yeah, absolutely, and it's given me a sort of a better thought approach to it. I think, where instead of what I was just ranting about there, where it's like, it's all controlled, and if you're playing this game, you have to play one of the cruxes. Rather than that, it's more that when you consult the Crucible versus consulting the Oracle, like the way that it's framed to the players is that
exactly.
To play this game, you will be consulting the Crucible, and we present it as like the Crucible has, its own agenda, basically. So rather than consult the Oracle, it's very much speaks to you as the player. Like when you as a player kind of need ideas, roll on the Oracle, and meta, it will give you some inspiration. Maybe we sort of lean into it's not that, it's like, this is the world doing its thing and you're just along for the ride, right?
Yeah, and you can fight that, but in my opinion is the overlay of that, just as meta knowledge that you have as a human player, feels more constricting than if you're swearing a vow to fulfill it.
Yeah, exactly.
One of them feels like progress, the other one feels like I really don't have a choice and I want to break out of this machine, which only fuels you to then want to take action. So, yeah, I think it can work.
Yeah, I love that. And that having that framed that way will be the lens through which players like interpret the roles when they consult the Crucible, right? It's like, even if it's something super beneficial, there'll be that element of, all right, what does this really mean? Yeah, and that will just sort of naturally inject itself into the types of stories that you tell. I love that. I'm so excited.
So am I. So the final thing that shouldn't matter, because in Ironsworn I haven't seen it come up, but I was leaning toward similarly if there's one asset. So if you take Veilwalker, theoretically someone else can't. I mean, they could, but they wouldn't have the nifty little card. Do you see that as problematic?
No, I think it's good.
Yeah.
I actually think it's good. I think it's more interesting.
Perfect. And since we're splitting up the cultures into 3 assets, 2 or 3 assets, you could still have 2 Zarfin, but they would markedly be different because they're going to have different abilities. So they would represent different parts of the culture by design. So,
Yep. And if with that way, if so again, a way that Dungeon World, for example, does it is, and a lot of Powered by the Apocalypse games is like, instead of it being, the path is called Oathscarred or Marauder or Eloquent, it's like the Oathscarred, the Marauder, the Eloquent. You're like, if it can only be the one, then
that's super good.
Yeah,
Awesome.
it gives it
Well,
the feel
hit
of
up the chat.
gives it the feel of like as if someone's writing about it in the future, like, and they don't know your name, so they call you the Oathscarred because that's all they know about you. The title that you earned or whatever. So it feels sort of mythic or something.
And
It really does.
That, like, we can lean into that as well with the whole Crucible thing. It's like the Crucible doesn't give a shit what your name is. Like, it's just the Oathscarred. Like, that's how the universe knows you. It's the Oathscarred must kill this monster for the timeline to be correct,
I'm gonna make a note, and this is just flavor text because I enjoy adding these kinds of things, but I want to put a note where in the asset selection section, some say that the choice has already been made for you and that you're just playing into it.
I love that. Yeah, that's exactly it.
Yeah. So, well, if it's cool with you, then I was going to just do a quick recap and you tell me if I missed anything because I made a million notes.
Awesome.
So, first, let's break down the fact that we were dealing with heritages, cultures, backgrounds, and classes. Heritages would be stripped down to a very narrative thing and maybe one specific mechanical bonus, maybe. Same for backgrounds. Cultures would have 2 or 3 assets that were themed to the silos of that culture. And then the classes are paths. And you get a thing, and then you may choose one other subclass that won't give you a new thing necessarily, but a new way to do your thing or beef up your thing. The cards would probably be 2-sided so that they would have enough for there to be lore and then all the mechanics on the other side. The Iron Vow is replaced by the Crux. Those happen to you or you try to happen to them, and you don't consult the Oracle, you consult the Crucible. Did I miss anything?
So
No,
good.
I think that's it. Yep.
I think that's...
I'm really digging it.
Yeah. It jives really well.
Cool.
No, nothing missed there. The only thing would be with the cultural affinity stuff. Is that still relevant, or because we've got culture as like sort of three asset options? With the like cheaper buying the cheaper stuff. Yeah.
I would probably pick
note with a question mark for now.
Yeah, if I had to answer you right now, I would make the heritages. I would distill it down to the 3 coolest ones, and then you pick one at the beginning, and you never level it up, and you never change it.
Yeah.
Like you just get this aspect of, so you can turn to stone because you're a dwarf.
Yeah.
But you never get to change it, and it'll never level or shift or anything.
Yeah, that's perfect. Yeah, because then you can have multiple dwarves in your group.
Exactly.
You can't have multiple the Oathscarred though. Yeah.
Right. Exactly.
And as well, although you can probably, if you've got multiple dwarves, then maybe they can't. No, never mind. I was going to say maybe that's another exclusive thing. Like if you've got 2 dwarves, only one of them can turn to stone. No, I think that's too restrictive.
And theoretically, if there's only one heritage card, then you would only have 1 dwarf. So that would be something worth looking at because there would be more. That's a little less awesome and specific. So I don't know how to handle that.
Well,
because,
I think
it's like
if you present it as like, sorry, I lost my thought. Please go, Lloyd.
Sorry.
No.
What if it's like the dwarf of place, dwarf of this place, or like so it's specific still.
Ooh.
So like, yeah, I guess it's tricky because you don't want to say like only one of you can be a dwarf, but only one of you can be the dwarf that's from this place that has this thing, that has this.
Yeah,
ability,
and I love that, where it's like it tags it. The one issue that I would find is having to have multiple asset cards.
Yeah. I remember my thought, which was we could do a similar thing because again, like this, the whole crucible thing is handy. A handy touchstone in this design process is like, it could be the dwarf, you know, because we're talking about a point in time in a timeline. It's like, there's hundreds of dwarves in this city, but the dwarf, like the Crucible knows that there is one important dwarf relevant to, keeping the timeline intact, just like works. There's one relevant Oathsguard, you know? Yeah.
I love that.
So it's like, there could be, there are hundreds of whatever, all of the different races, right? But the only one that matters, is this one specifically.
Yeah. And then when there's Arcseers, like, and they're talking about the dwarf in a city full of dwarves, like they're talking about the player character who is the dwarf because they're the relevant protagonists, right? Like,
that fits. And so let me ask this question, because I didn't think of this until prior. If I have to choose 3 of these, so right now I'm having to choose. Well, I'm not having to choose. Well, yeah, you'd have to choose a heritage, I think. Like, you couldn't not be one.
Yeah.
So then you have to choose, I guess you wouldn't have to choose a culture, but the one you'd have to choose is heritage. So here's my thought. What if we sheerly make heritage narrative? No mechanics. It's just the lore. There's no asset cards. It's just a write-up in the book, and you just pick. Or it's an asset card that everyone just kind of reads and no one keeps.
Could be that, but then so there's no asset that you take for heritage, but there is a spot on your character sheet to write which one you are.
Where you write it in. And here's why. I would feel not as great if I had to pick a sort of hobbled one of the 3 because I have to be a bioform. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So it still gives me opportunity to choose 3 like at character creation normally in Ironsworn without having to like, oh, well, sorry, you have to. Write down your heritage, and then there could be a card that represents it so people can read it.
They're reference cards instead of asset cards, And for example, the dwarf could, it could have things like, well, here we go back to the lore triangle, right? It could be like, some say they can turn to stone, others whisper, blah, blah, blah. And then it's like things that you can lean on.
Flipping lore triangles.
Yeah, buddy.
I love it.
I love that. That's great. Write it down.
That feels very. I'm typing all of this into an email. That feels very Ironsworn.
Yes. Yeah, for sure. That's it. I think that's a great way to do it. Yeah. Rather than having cultural assets. Yeah. Heritage.
That gives you a bit more leeway to make the background more interesting too, or more.
Ooh, yeah, good call.
Because you don't have an asset for heritage, then either background or culture could get a bit beefier, I guess,
Yep. Yeah, because then that leaves just the background, the cultures, and the class, which some of those would be broken out as an example. Like for the culture, the Silverwise Hound would probably be, like you say, a companion.
Yeah.
That probably would be like, we break the things that make the most sense. You'd break it off, and then that would be a companion that is also Silverwise, and maybe because of the kind of companion it is, or because it's got the little Silverwise emblem, it goes to the economy we talked about before, where Silverwise can take it as an upgrade versus...
Hell yeah. And, okay. How about... Sorry, I don't know if you wanted to wrap up. Just getting more ideas.
I'm good for a little while longer. I never want to keep people past the time I tell them, but let me check the chat real quick, because I know we have some people watching. I want to make sure. Let's see here.
Thought.
Hey, Barks. Yes, he just jumped in just in time for a sick rundown. Barker, I think we really are onto something here. I am much closer to being able to start writing stuff down than I thought I was going to be after this. I am notorious for having great conversations and then not making good notes, and then a week later going, oh God, what did we say? So
having to rewatch
hey, what's going on this year in Kenya?
Double time.
Yeah, that's exactly what I need to do. So what was your thought, Kiel?
So it was about heritages. Okay, yeah. So I'll just say it this way. Heritages are just like reference cards now, not asset cards themselves. And so it's purely narrative. But what about so in standard Ironsworn, some of the types of asset cards, there's companions and past, there's actually also rituals, which is the magic thing, which we can maybe get into in another stream, but there's also combat talents. And so I'll just throw out this disconnected thought, and then we can discuss it. Like, would we have maybe like a combat talent of like, tooth and claw, something like that, where I guess it would only be like a Festier type thing, but
so two things that would break the rules that are sort of not shoehorned in, but like two things that would break the rules. I would have Tome Heart as an asset card because they're so different. It's not just, oh yeah, I'm a dwarf, I'm an elf, because they would have like robot powers.
Yeah.
So that if you choose Tome Heart, it's enough of a differentiator, and I'd probably do the same with Festier.
So then what if you choose, sorry to interrupt you, but I just think like...
No, yeah, that's pretty much it.
What if you choose your heritage and then it's like background can include, instead of choosing a background, you could also choose, okay, well, I'm like a robot or I'm like a demon.
Yeah.
So
I love it.
Rather than having, because it feels weird to me to have like two heritage and not have them all, So there would have to be, I think, assets chosen in a different step. Like, you can be a Tome Heart, but if you want to be like the kind of Tome Heart that has all the robot stuff, then you got to pick this asset somewhere else.
That's, I think, what I was getting at. Yeah, there's like an optional asset for like, and Tooth and Claw, which is like a Festier thing, is what came to mind. But yeah,
Kiel, you have it. You solved it. So it wouldn't be we just have to come up with another.
So it doesn't have to be called background. It could be called something else, right?
No, I got it. Hold on. We did all this work. Why don't I use the work we did? I'm like, why don't I? No, so Tooth and Claw, I think that's perfect because you're not just a Festier. You're a Festier. That's the differentiator between the humanoid one and the monstrous one. And then for Tome Heart, the differentiator wouldn't be that you're awakened, because any adventuring Tome Heart would be awakened. And I can't remember what we called it. Oh God, it's not a compulsion.
Like a battle bot or something instead of like a regular bot.
Yeah. We called it. So we have this thing that we wanted to make, that if you're an awakened Tome Heart, you used to be a repository of information. Now you're awake and you're repressing that, but your compulsion and your knowledge of all of that doesn't just go away. Incitement.
Mm-hmm.
That's what it's called. When a Tome Heart becomes awakened, they typically lose most of the programmed information pertaining to their incitement. And basically the incitement is the desire, the innate desire to complete the task they were once programmed for. Much like a person's need to eat, many Tome Hearts feel a hunger to complete a task in line with their incitement. These cravings they vary in frequency. Something like that, where you use the lore in here to say incitement, where you are a Tome Heart robot.
With a purpose, right? Like you
with a purpose, yeah. Like you have exactly, and then for that you get these mechanical things.
Yeah, I think that's nice, and it's like, so you pick your heritage, and then if you want to, instead of taking a different thing, you can double down on your heritage for some sort of heritage thing, like a specific asset. So if you want to be whatever, you want to be like a Tome Heart or a Festier or a dwarf or whatever, like you are that, you look like that, you are that. But if you want to like double down on your heritage, like giving you stuff, then you can choose to do that, but you choose it in lieu of something else.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think we would need a new category for that. I think that would work as a path.
Yeah, exactly. Some of them would be combat talents, some would be paths. Some of the more magical ones would be rituals or spells, whatever we'd call those talents instead of rituals. Because obviously that's another big point of difference, is whereas magic is quite subtle and ritual based in standard Ironsworn, it's a lot more overt in Dragongrin, obviously. That'll be a
Yeah,
fun
so
one.
if you
Sure.
choose to be a wizard, you get a combat, like you can change the combat move or something that lets you do it, right? Like that's how it would work. It would just be
Yeah, there'd be.
Yeah, I would the thing that is a sort of hanging. So there is light magic called rituals. I don't know that I would want to have a full spell casting system. I had some sort of notes on this. I don't want that. That's way too complex for what Ironsworn's trying to do.
Yeah.
But I agree with what you're saying, Lloyd. Like something in between a ritual and a like maybe certain classes have access to certain rituals, or it's easier for them.
Yeah.
Or like you get a +1 when you cast this spell,
Right.
or whatever.
yeah.
Yeah.
I think there would be spell cards as well. I don't think they would just be rituals. I think we want to call them spells
Yeah.
because of how magical Dragongrin is.
Absolutely, yeah. Yeah, and like the warlock, I think the sorcerer is like a spell blood, and yeah. So the ritual assets in standard Ironsworn, that's kind of how they work. Like for example, there's one here called Shadow Walk, and it's got 3 bubbles. The one that's pre-filled in is when you cloak yourself with the gossamer veil of the Shadow Realms, roll plus shadow. So that is actually introducing its own little move, I guess. So what we said before is not strictly true, that there's no extra moves added to sort of the core engine. But I mean, this isn't technically a move. It's just a separate little side roll to see if you get or what type of bonus you get. But yeah, that's what I think there will be. That's one of the more overt sort of rituals in standard Ironsworn.
Since it's such a big part of Dragongrin that you have like, what is it, 4 magical classes or whatever, you could make a move that is like, invoke the arcane or something,
exactly what I was thinking was
right?
a move.
You make one extra, I don't think it's a huge deal, to make a move that is like dual magic,
Yeah.
like,
exactly.
like,
Yeah.
and it's got various effects and whatever. It's going to be simplified. It's not going to be like, but it's all simplified. It's not going to be like D&D where it's like, I cast this spell. It's going to be like, okay, I invoke the arcane or the divine and I do this cool thing, right?
Can you give let's talk about an example there, because I don't think that's necessary. I think the core engine of the moves does cover everything, because there's so like it's literally like secure an advantage, gather information. So it could be, like if there's a scry or like an arcane eye spell card, like that would just be, it would make your gather information better or your secure an advantage better, you know what I mean, in very specific ways. That's how I think it would probably work.
I see.
I get what you're saying, yeah. And I would the thing that I guess in the same way that it was more of like a repainting, I would almost want to figure out something to remove rituals. Because it doesn't feel tonally like Dragongrin, because they don't typically cast rituals. They cast magic, like hard.
Yeah.
Like,
I think it would just
it's
be
such a high magic world.
renaming.
So just change the name.
Yeah, ritual to magic. Not even spell, just, I mean, maybe spell, but I think maybe just magic, because it's just the like category of asset, magic.
Yeah.
Because,
too.
Sorry, I was going to say as well, then that's when you can start getting into arcans and magic items and stuff as well, like potentially, like just going back to assets here. One of the, I think, it's not a combat talent. I think it's a path. It's like blade bound, where, sorry, scrolling up here, where are you? There we go, blade bound. So once you mark a bond with a kin blade, a sentient weapon imbued with the spirit of your ancestor, ... and then there's 3 bubbles to choose which bonus you get from it, so some assets are tied to an item, as well. Generally equipment is abstracted, but when there's specific important items to you and your character, and probably also important to the crux, right? That's when you can have specific assets for that. So
well, can I pitch you something about a magic system that I think might work?
Please.
So, first of all, I loved the language you used, Lloyd, which was invoke the arcane. I did want to tune it a little bit and say I think it would be really cool if the move was called Invoke the Bleak. Just because bleak is where all the magic comes from, right? And that way it's just themey and painted with theme.
Oh, yeah.
What if the move was Invoke the Bleak? So it's a move. Only certain... If you have that class, you can Invoke the Bleak. If you don't, you can't. So fighters can't go, I'm going to Invoke the Bleak.
Right.
So
and that's what you get when you choose the class. You get... The thing you get is not some... It's like, you get to do this move, right?
You get to do this move, and then what you could do is, if we wanted to go down this road, it would be as simple as, 10, 12 cards. You would just do your own versions of the School of Magic. And you keep it super general. So you wouldn't... Because then that way you could be a mage or someone who... I wouldn't break it into, only this person can do this thing. But, you would have something as an example, like if you did, the School of Invocation. And then you could give a couple cool little, plus shadow when summoning or whatever. You know what I mean? Things that are very, very general, and it's like, you're not giving them spells, you're giving them make-up magic.
Yeah.
How does that feel? Does that feel too far?
No, I think it's let's keep pulling this thread, because to me, I think again, I'm definitely not opposed to adding a new move, right? But I like you said, it's not something done lightly. So my pitch in response to that is, or my sort of counter thought is that could be a narrative trigger rather than its own move. When you invoke the Bleak.
That's what I had in mind with invoke, because it's a verb. It's when because when I can't speak at the moment, they're always when you blank, right? When you do a thing, and so I think trigger. That's why invoke is useful at the start of that.
It's very smart. So it's a narrative trigger. Now, how do you feel about an asset for the spell schools or spell types? Is that would you cut that?
No, I think I like that idea. I'm trying to figure out how it would all work.
I might choose it rather than spell schools, with the subclass. So you're a Bleak sorcerer. So when you invoke the Bleak, you can XYZ. Or
just tie it right to the class.
Or you're a time
asset necessary.
You're a time wizard, so when you invoke the Bleak, you XYZ, right? You have different options based on what subclass you are, based on the path that you've chosen.
Perfect.
Yeah, okay.
I love it.
So we just need to be deliberate with the way we design those bonuses, because we've said that you can only choose one subclass. If you've got 3 options, but we can also have the class bubble that comes pre-filled in when you choose that path. That one can be the one that says when you invoke the Bleak, maybe that's where the default thing comes in.
Maybe they all let you fight with shadow. Do the combat move using shadow instead of steel or whatever it is. I can't remember offhand. Or iron. So rather than using iron to fight, you can use shadow because you're a mage. Right, for example, that might be the thing you get, and then you get one that lets you modify a move to do a cool thing. So if you're a time wizard, it lets you modify Enter the Fray, so you can all go first, or it lets blah blah blah. And then a third thing, which is something more narrative, I think. So when you're in a very specific situation and the specific thing happens, you can do this cool thing. That's just a first throw stuff at the wall, but that's sort of the thing that I always like is I want to play a wizard and I don't want to now have to go into a fight and punch people with weapons. I want to be able to use my magic to fight. And so if it's as simple as you use shadow to fight, then you can describe whatever the fuck spell you want.
Yeah. And I would even and I love that. And I would, again, because the limits are, so the beauty of the way that Ironsworn is written, and I don't have it in front of me, so I could be lying on accident. I don't think it necessarily says actual iron. I think it's just a representation, right, of just fighting. So you could even say, but I get what you're saying. They probably wouldn't want to use.
It's the stat. Is what I'm talking about. The attribute
in there. Yeah, right. Yeah. So what if the different classes used different different stats. So it was wits if you're a wizard.
Yeah.
Use your wits. Use shadow if you're a warlock.
Yeah.
Right.
You know, that kind of thing.
A rogue.
If you're a rogue, yeah, like if you're the time dabbler, maybe you can use your shadow as.
Yeah, it's super simple. I also don't think everyone has to be equally good at fighting, but I do think
Agreed.
that that a wizard should be real scary in a fight because they have magic, right? For example, and they are really scary, and so you don't want them to be limited to now I have to put points in iron so I can't remember what the move is called, but like the fighting one.
Enter the fray or invoke pain or invoke harm or
well, you think the move that's like I punch a guy or whatever, I fight a guy.
There's strike and strike. There's a couple of different ones depending whether you have initiative or not, but there's strike and clash. Yeah. So
having the ability then to use the stat you're good at because you're a wizard or a warlock or a cleric or whatever, like that I think is the good baseline for I am this thing instead.
Yeah, I think that's brilliant. So how should I notate that here in my section of classes and magic? What's a good way to distill that down?
I would say magic-based classes are able to use a different attribute for combat.
Yep, perfect.
And then I would say like the next thing they get for being a wizard or whatever is some way to improve a different move. So like you said, Kiel, like Arcane Eye. So if you're a diviner, for example, or I think you should limit them or specialize them based on the Dragongrin subclasses as opposed to the schools of magic. So rather than diviner, it's the time wizard. I can't remember what it's called.
Yeah, me either. Or the Thaumaveor.
Yeah, right. So it's like when you do this specific thing that makes sense for your subclass thematically, then you can improve it somehow. So for example, Arcane Eye lets you gather information more quickly, that sort of stuff, right?
Got it. So the subclasses let you do a move better.
So yeah. And again, I'm just thinking now for Arcane Eye, if we have that as specific, and I don't know what the legalities are from Wizards of the Coast to use that particular term. But anyway, let's just say if there's a magic asset called Arcane Eye, it might be like the narrative trigger might be when you invoke the bleak to secure an advantage or gather information, then blah, like you roll with a bonus or whatever it might be,
so something like.
So that might be what a spell card could look like. Different ones would look different, but yeah, that's kind of how I imagine it. It's still just really open to interpretation. Yes, it's called Arcane Eye, but with your group of players who haven't played RPGs before, don't know what the Arcane Eye 5e spell is about.
Exactly.
They can then flavor that how they like,
Yeah, I love it. And I also think because we're building it to be general until it needs to be specific, like I love the idea that it's magic until it needs to be a spell.
Yeah.
It's kind of the way I'm thinking of it. Then it's like, I use magic to do this, and I use magic to do this, but this is a big one. I have to use a spell.
Yeah.
This isn't just, you know what I mean? And I think that that's a cool distinction.
Yeah. And having it be just magic means that like wizards and sorcerers are doing things like just throwing out magic when they're fighting or just like teleporting around when they do so narratively. So they're way more magical in a way than they are in regular D&D where it's all gated by how many times you can cast X spell per day or whatever. It's like you're not limited by that at all. You just say it happens and it does,
Right. And then you roll, and based on your stat or how good, it's like, wow. In cases where it matters, it could still go well or poorly. Yeah, so I love that.
That's right, yeah. And also, like, we have all of these other attributes, whatever they're called, on your character sheet. Like you have momentum, you have your health, your spirit. And health and spirit and supply. But then there's also like suffer moves, right? Which is endure harm or endure stress. So a lot of the magic assets or the spells in particular, the sort of big ones that are taxing, it could be, you just do the thing. Like it's when maybe Arcane Eye, if we call that powerful enough, probably wouldn't be, but
Sure.
say, same thing. When you invoke the bleak to secure an advantage or gather information, use this bonus and endure stress.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's like that's the cost is built in.
Love it.
Yeah. Yep.
So when you invoke the bleak to do, when you invoke the bleak to gain an advantage, you can do blah and endure stress.
Yeah.
Is that how you said it?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, that's perfect. And while you were talking, I had another idea too, is messing around with the other, whatever you call tracks, I'll call them.
Yeah, that's what they are. That's right.
Mess with the other tracks on the sheet for the cultures. That seems like a good way, like the Granach Thane, if they're tied to the red sail market or the background, the red sail market, your resupply should be maxed up. You should be that's going to be easy for you to do. Or if the X or Y, we can really tinker with all of those dials.
Absolutely, yeah. My thought with that one for the Granach Thane and the red sail market would be there's a, what's it called, adventure move called resupply. When you hunt, forage, or scavenge, roll plus wits. Okay, so that one's like resupplying in the wilderness. But there's another one, sojourn, which is when you spend time in a community seeking assistance, roll plus heart to like bump up your supply. Sorry, I was jumping between those two because they are, I think, the only two ways to increase your supply. One is when you're in a community, that's part of the narrative trigger, and the other is just when you're out.
But so it would be in the community, so maybe the Granach Thane rock, right? Like,
well, I was going to say maybe it could be like I don't know, maybe you can resupply. I don't know. You can treat it.
I get what you're getting at. You could, you may perform the sojourn move.
That's what I'm trying to say.
You can perform the sojourn move outside of a community if the red sail market is nearby, or if you could, whatever.
Yeah.
But basically, you can perform the sojourn move outside of needing to be in a community.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah. That's
right.
That's
and I mean,
what I was getting at.
Similarly, you can have barbarians, like barbarian subclasses, mess with the momentum track, or fighters mess with the momentum track in a way where they can, gain momentum more easily, or whatever it is, like things like that. There's lots of interesting ways to.
Yeah. Or for the berserker, a great one would be like when you would suffer like a negative to your health, or maybe even your spirit as well, you can instead take that negative to momentum instead. Because the way momentum works is you can't spend it one at a time. You gradually build it up, and then if you want to burn it, it's all in one to like turn a
right.
Yeah.
So you could spend one momentum. You break that rule.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Like,
if you can literally use your momentum as temporary hit points, basically.
Yeah.
Or as additional hit points, which is potentially incredibly powerful, but I think worth trying.
And we'll find out. And I was gonna say it's pretty easy to put gates up.
Yeah.
Like once per battle, things like that, or like once per battle you can do it with one momentum total.
Yeah.
Because in Ironsworn, it's like a 5 hit point situation.
Yeah. Or it could just be it could be 1-for-1, or it could be when you would suffer a negative to your health, you can instead burn your momentum or something like that, instead of it being 1-for-1.
Yeah.
I think the 1-for-1 would be great, but you could just sit up on plus 10 momentum. But it's also like, it's not super easy to get a huge amount of momentum, really, and you do want to spend it. Like if you're failing a roll and you could turn that miss into a weak hit, and you have to burn your 8 momentum to reset back down to 2, like it's often you'll take that option, So I think it should be pretty good, but that's a playtest question.
Yeah, I mean, and that's honestly, I think what we'll do is I have answers to every major question that I was like totally stuck at. So I think what we'll do is just call it here and then say, like, my goal is to, by the end of September, have some sort of rough proof of concept.
Awesome.
Of like, hey, here's one heritage, one culture, one everything, one spell, one everything. And so, that sounds really cool. And is there any final thoughts?
One more to add to your notes is an additional track for infamy.
Ooh, yeah.
love that.
And I really want to stay involved in this, so please let me do that.
I absolutely want to talk to you guys about that after the stream.
Yeah, I kicked the door in on the stream and I just invited myself, and now I'm in, baby. Now I'm in.
Winning, boys.
Can't get rid of me now. Yep.
Superliminal Lloyd, Superliminal Collins.
Yeah. Just hopping into Zooms I'm not invited to.
I love it, man. Oh, that's fantastic. Well, thank you all for tuning in, and I appreciate it. Asir, thank you so much. Asir said, I love listening to the guys brainstorm this kind of stuff. I wish I was stronger in that type of stuff. It's years of doing it. It's just years and years of doing it. I've been designing games some form or another for 7 years. So I'm a level 7 game designer. And if you've been doing it for 1 year, you're a level 1 game designer. Just think of it that way.
You also are good at it. Like, we don't have formal training, right? You just sort of do it and you keep doing it. Like, you are good at it, you know? Like, we don't have any special powers or whatever. Yeah, you just have to keep messing with stuff, you know? Make a load of...
and trying it out. And
make a load of bad shit so then you can realize what's bad and then you make the good stuff, you know?
Ain't that the truth? Man,
don't at me, bro.
There's some stuff I can look in the rearview mirror at and go,
yeah.
What a rad lord.
It's closer than it may appear.
No kidding. Well, if you have such things, I am going to do a toast. But feel free to not run and grab a drink or anything. But and this goes to everybody out there too. Boy, I got a good grease going. I forgot to turn the air down. So just get that on it. I am barely human, certified in 50 states. May you mend the first break. May you kill the first snake, and may you conquer everything you undertake. Sláinte. Appropriating an Irish toast.
Yep. It's Sláinte.
It's called misappropriation, Mr. Carney.
What's the cilantro? Yeah. It's called misappropriation. Yeah, but I didn't miss. I'm gonna end it there. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. This has been fantastic.
Bye.
It's been amazing.